Hello everyone, glad you can make it today. In this video, we'll be taking a look at accessories with the Mirasoul flight unit and the Demi Trainer expansion set. On their own, they don't seem video worthy, but by combining the two, we have a nice little project that gives us a break from the usual builds, but has the ability to enhance said builds. But with that out of the way, let's get to work. First, we're taking a look at the Mirasoul flight unit. Inside the box are two runners which comprise the flight unit itself, as well as some open hand parts. As expected, the build goes together super quick, being just a backpack. But it does have some neat features like beam saber storage, and side thrusters that slide in and out of the wings. It's a cool little set that I like and see lots of potential for kit bashes and customs. The main wings are in two halves, so you will need to do some seam line correction, but I didn't bother. In the anime, the Mirasoul is pieced together from old parts, so I'm going for a similar look. I want this to have an aged, almost rugged appearance, but not totally beat up and rusted, so for me, that means metallic texture. The flight unit was primed with Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 and sprayed with Tamiya TS17 Light Aluminum. I'm working with Mr. Metal Color paints, using different metallic shades to achieve some tonal variation. I'm starting off with the darkest color and mainly using the paint to cover the entire piece. I'm essentially just dry brushing these paints on, which has two main benefits for me. The first is speed, and the second is me not having to deal with any thinners and the surrounding risks. On the Mr. Hobby website, these paints are described as not needing any thinner, which I can get behind. I don't like having to need multiple kinds of thinners for logistical reasons, as well as thinners just being an extra cost. There's a reason why I'm only just starting to experiment with using different kinds of paint. After the first color dries, which isn't that long, I can paint on lighter shades. With these lighter colors, I'm keeping the brush strokes in a single direction to create a brushed metal look. My brush of choice is a 12 filbert. The large size allows for quick coverage, and the curved filbert shape creates slightly irregular streaks. I also use the same brush for all my colors. Because these paints dry so fast, they don't mix. I've never cleaned this brush either, although the brush does harden up after I'm done painting. Whenever I use it again, it works perfectly fine. The different metallics look great as is, but you can polish up these paints for an incredibly realistic metallic finish. It's quite remarkable and unlike anything else I've ever used. I'm using a Q-tip, although you can use a tissue or dedicated polishing cloth. In addition to how realistic the paints look, they're also very durable. I only let the paints dry for the bare minimum, 10 to 15 minutes at most, but they're standing up to the pressure of me polishing them up pretty well. Next are decals. I'm using Bandai's mainly because I have them in stock. I would go with the G rework set if I hadn't already built an aerial. Bandai's decal quality has gotten better, but they just aren't as detailed as the third-party options. But on something simple like the flight unit, this is no problem. It doesn't have that many decals anyways. After letting the decals dry, I'm doing a grunge wash. For the look I'm going for, this wash application is preferred to the usual pin wash. I start by painting a black wash all over the kit surfaces and wipe off all the excess with a Q-tip, which leaves the majority of the wash in all the details. Some of it will get removed, but that's easily fixed by applying more wash in those areas. It's quick, it's easy, it's perfect for items where I don't want to spend more time than I think is needed. I'm doing a neutral gray filter which will blend everything together and add to the aged look by toning things down, almost giving a faded appearance. A filter is just some heavily thin paint which gets painted all over a model. Because the paint is so thin, you need to keep the wet paint from pooling. However, since the paint is so thin anyways, if it does happen to pool up when drying, you won't really notice it just because it is thinned out already. Although this isn't an excuse to be careless. When this dries, I'll spray it with Mr. Hobby's flat premium top coat. The finish is slightly chalky, which just adds to the age appearance I'm shooting for. Last are those thruster ports on the sides, which I'm painting with some silver acrylic ink. This one from Liquitex has some iridescent qualities that I think just fit inside a thruster. But with that, the flight unit is done. Here it is. I really like the look of the flight unit, and I think it upgrades the look of the aerial quite significantly. The Mr. Metal color paints added the texture I wanted, and the flat finish contrasts the semi-gloss of the aerial nicely. But now, let's take a look at some Demi Trainer parts. Inside the box are 2 runners with all of the accessories. It's so hard to find something to say about the set because it's just a bunch of weapons, but they are very modular with a wide variety of configurations for such a small set. Almost everything is compatible with each other, which allows for more options than you first think. I primed the weapons with Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 and sprayed a coat of Tamiya TS100 semi-gloss bright gunmetal. I want the knife to have more than just a flat metallic, so I'm going for a glowing effect like Xeon's heat weapons. I start off with some orange in all the areas I want to be glowing. I'm not exactly looking for rich flat color, but just enough to cover the dark metallic and create a much more natural transition for the future colors. I'll give the entire knife blade 2 thin coats. Now I'm painting over everything with gold, which is why I needed the orange. Out of all the metallic colors I've worked with, gold is the most temperamental and the most transparent. Without the orange, it would look weak. This is a mixture of a Citadel gold and silver acrylic ink. The silver ink's iridescent qualities makes the gold a lot more glittery and visually interesting. The ink does make things a little tricky to work with since it is very thin, with a consistency similar to a wash, which would be fine if I was using it as one, but you can make it work if you're careful and build up the color bit by bit. I'm using a mixture of transparent yellow and red and blending the paint while wet to achieve a nice transition from darker to lighter orange. It's a cool effect and might be my new heat hawk method going forwards. I just need to practice it more. This was literally my first time trying this out. Next is that circular saw, and I'm going for yellow. Since the metallic is so dark, it can be difficult to get some nice coverage with yellow, but if you first paint on a color similar to yellow, the final result will be much nicer. I'm going with yellow ochre, mainly because I haven't used it that much, but any sort of light tan or even a flesh tone will work. Now I'm painting on flat yellow. I usually choose golden yellow since it is the superior paint, but I am once again trying to use up more of my colors. That being said, I was reminded pretty quickly why I work with golden yellow if I can help it. My paint was a little clumpy and I could go from too thick to too thin very easily. This paint coat definitely isn't even, but that's okay. I wanted this to look like a piece of equipment that was used constantly, so a bit of patchiness is actually preferred. It's a feature, not a bug. To add to the worn appearance, I'm doing some physical chipping with my tweezers. Because the metallic is so dark, the chipping will show up much more than usual and make the piece seem aged. The actual process of physical chipping is extremely simple, but the part that requires some thought are the actual colors you choose. Depending on the degree of subtlety you want, you can use colors that have more or less contrast. In the past, I've gone with a lighter metallic undercoat, which is a nice color on its own, but does tend to get lost with the colors I normally paint with, at least on camera. This is also why I've switched primers to the black finishing surfacer entirely. Gray primers can make metallics seem washed out, which results in physical chipping that isn't as noticeable, and I want my chipping to be noticed. It's why I spend so much time doing it. Now I'm using a dark brown wash mixture for a grunge wash. Because this piece is so small, I'm not bothering with a patina, instead using the dark brown color to both add shadows and make the saw look dirty. A grunge wash is a fast way to knock back the factory fresh look on a model. The speed is really appreciated since I don't like spending that much time on weapons anyways, and when the wash is painted on all the surfaces, I remove the excess with a paper towel and add it back if needed. I'm using a paper towel for these weapons instead of the Q-tip I used on the Mirasoul because it's much smaller. With the Mirasoul's larger surfaces, I needed the extra control of a Q-tip, which can also be used to create streaking effects. The final weapon is the beam rifle. If you've built Chuchu's Demi Trainer, this is going to look really familiar. I'm starting with the magazine using a tried and true color, green-gray. It's one of my most used paints, and the subdued color really grounds things and adds that real-world military feel that I like. Now I'm painting the beam rifle itself, at least the back half of it. I normally use basalt gray, but I wanted to see how a lighter gray would look. And it's not too bad. While painting on this color, I felt it was too light, but when it's done, it works pretty well. Now I have an alternative color to use if I want to conserve my basalt gray supply. I finish things off with the grunge wash, this time using a straight black, and when this dries, I'll seal everything with the same flat coat. And here are the finished weapons. I don't really like expansion sets in general, but these ones aren't too bad. Although I think each one of the Witcher Mercury kits are good, if not great, there is a lack of accessories overall, and this set allows for some nice variety. As usual, this isn't meant to be an explicit statement on how to paint your own Gunpla, but a look into my own process. Feel free to use any colors or techniques in your own projects. Next in the series, we'll be tackling the last of the three branches sort of prototype suits with Grassley Defense Systems Michaelis. The kit is nice and simple, and the knightly aesthetic is going to give us lots of opportunities to have some fun and work with metallics. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, consider supporting the channel, and I'll be seeing you in the next video, whenever that is.